What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Thank you for clicking onto this reaction. I hope you're looking forward to it just as much as I am. If you haven't already, head over to the content creators page. That link is in the description box down below. If you haven't already and you're enjoying our content, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're going to jump straight into this one.
One thing that I find very interesting is the black ops stuff that governments do to protect their power from what they see as a threat.
It's very interesting, and it's also interesting to when some of the files come out from the FBI to see what was actually true, some of those conspiracy theories we had.
Stories can often be very scary when you see the great lengths that governments will go to and the extremely morally bankrupt things that they will do to get rid of someone that they don't like. But sometimes when governments fail at something like this over and over, these stories can instead be extremely entertaining. And what makes it even more entertaining is some of the Looney Tunes schemes that governments will pull to kill their target, and these schemes still failing.
I'm looking forward to finding out how many of these schemes failed.
Like when the CIA was trying to kill Fidel Castro. The magnet to the wall and some of my...
Come on, I don't want the ads.
So make sure
Skip the ads.
but we click the link. Now,
Here we go.
this is not a mad lad on Fidel Castro, but we do need to go into his life story so that you can understand how he got into a position where he ended up in the crosshairs of the CIA. So, Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz was born in Biran in the Republic of Cuba on the 13th of August 1926, and he was one of 7 children. Fidel attended Roman Catholic boarding schools in Santiago de Cuba and in the Catholic high school Belen in Havana, where he proved to be quite an accomplished athlete. He was named Havana's outstanding schoolboy sportsman in 1943 and again in 1944.
That's interesting. What was his like favorite sort of sports was it track? Was it
track and field, baseball, basketball, and table tennis? In 1945, Castro entered the School of Law of the University of Havana, where organized violent gangs sought to advance a mixture of romantic goals, political aims, and personal careers. Castro's main activity at the university was politics.
Okay.
And in 1947, he joined an abortive attempt by Dominican exiles and Cubans to invade the Dominican Republic and overthrow General Rafael Trujillo. He then took part in urban riots that broke out in Bogota, Colombia in April of 1948. After his graduation in 1950, Castro began to practice
So he was quite active from a young age then. I didn't know that about Castro.
and became a member of the reformist Cuban People's Party. He became their candidate for a seat in the House of Representatives from a Havana district in the elections that were scheduled for June of 1952. But in March of that year, the former Cuban president, a man called General Fulgencio Batista, had overthrown the government and cancelled all elections. And as most of us now
Again, I didn't know that either.
know, Castro became a Cuban revolutionary. Castro accused Batista of corruption and tyranny on multiple occasions, which is pretty damn ironic. What dictators do, though no one at the time knew that Castro wouldn't be much different. In fact, they saw him as a man of the people fighting on their side.
Which again is how most dictators are first perceived, right? I would assume so. Most of them get to their position because they have convinced the public that they're actually the best choice, which often turns out to not be true.
And obviously they were completely fucking wrong.
Completely fucking wrong.
Castro led his revolutionary movement to overthrow the dictator Batista, which became known as the 26th of July movement. The group had established a guerrilla base in the Sierra Maestra and were taking in other dissidents in order to build up enough forces to oppose the authoritarian state. After some time using guerrilla tactics, they finally defeated Batista's troops on the 31st of December 1958. After the revolution, Castro would go on to become the Prime Minister of Cuba from between 1959 and 1976, and then continue on as President from 1976 to 2008. Since, of course, in a dictatorship, no one exactly has a say on term limits, except the dictator. And would you believe that dictators
don't like giving out the power?
Right at the start of Castro's administration, Cuba quickly became a one-party communist state, and all industry and business, including banks, oil refineries, and sugar and coffee plantations, were all nationalised, with state socialist reforms implemented throughout the entire country. This, of course, painted a huge target on Castro's back, because the American government were extremely concerned because
they were shitting their pants that communism was going to infiltrate the US. They were just straight up petrified. They did not want communism within the country at all. They were happy being capitalists.
The American government hated communists. Remember when the American government hated communists? Better times. Well, now there was a communist nation right on the American government's door.
Count Dankula's delivery is so good.
So, this was a pretty huge cause for concern. Another reason that the American government was very concerned was because of Cuba's strong alliance with the USSR during a time when the Cold War was in full swing. Some people also believed that the US government felt that Cuba should be owned by the US, considering its proximity to the Florida coast, especially now that Cuba was a huge threat.
I didn't know that. So they thought that they had what am I trying to say there? They thought that because it was so close within the coast of the US that, like, a certain island may fall within the sort of proximity of the US. I didn't realise that was an argument going on between that sort of time. Castro is a controversial figure as far as dictators go. He was not that bad. The worst thing about him, I think, was his handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay. I can't really talk too much in regards to Castro because I don't know enough about him. Obviously, it really wasn't sort of covered. The only sort of information I've got is in regards to the Cuban Missile Crisis, but he didn't seem to be too involved in that. That was mainly the Russians and the Americans, and he was sort of just a puppet within that sort of that situation that outplayed. It seemed that it come across to me. So I definitely have to look into Castro's actual whole life to sort of get a measure if he was a dictator.
Everyone wanted Castro's head, and if you think having the American government desperately after you was bad enough, Castro had also pissed off another group of people that you simply just did not fuck with.
Who's that?
The Cosa Nostra, better known as the Mafia.
Oh,
had derailed
was it the Mexican because they were shipping through Cuba?
Mob's plans in Cuba, and high-profile organised crime figures such as Mayor Lansky and Santo Traficante Jr. were hit the hardest, as they had made huge investments in Cuba to expand the Mafia's enterprise. And Castro had fucked all of that up. Lansky was actually on Batista's payroll as the dictator's casino gambling advisor. And he had also just spent millions of dollars on his masterpiece gambling resort called the Hotel Riviera. The mob,
which I'm assuming is in Cuba, and now Fidel wants that to be communized, so he wants a stake from it, right?
invested so much money in Havana that they had built a tourism destination that rivaled Las Vegas. However, casinos and luxury resorts are something that communist Castro viewed as the pinnacle of capitalist hedonism and opulence.
So he's not even going to try and take a percentage. He just doesn't want them to run at all.
So that made them something that had to be destroyed. The morning after Castro took office, his rebels and their supporters took to the streets of Havana and trashed a number of the resorts. Slot machines were smashed and burned in the streets, windows were shattered, and the biggest act of disrespect was saved for the Riviera. The rebels brought in a truckload of pigs and set them loose in the lobby of the hotel and the casino.
What? At least, like, come on. If you're going to do it properly. Blow the thing up. Don't just let a bunch of pigs in there and just make it messy. Blow the thing up.
Tracking mud all over the place and leaving themselves all over landscapes.
You would be fucking fuming, though. You'd be fuming if you build this casino and this hotel. You come in and there's just pig shit everywhere. You'd be fucking fuming.
So yeah, the mafia were extremely pissed off. So here we have two groups that would scare the shit out of anyone.
The CIA and the mafia.
The government and the mafia. Technically both mobs. When you
both mobs indeed. Like I said, Count Dankula's delivery is so good.
The US government and the mafia really did not get along, you know? You may have heard. But both of them had an understanding of the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And this marks the beginning of these hilarious harebrained schemes. The US government teamed up with the mafia to assassinate Fidel Castro.
Oh my god, that's jokes. And how many times did they fuck it up? I can't wait. That's hilarious.
And these weren't just normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill mobsters. Two of them were on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. But the...
You're on the FBI's top 10 wanted list and you're working with the CIA. How risky and how close to getting incarcerated do you want to be? They must have hated Fidel. They must have hated him to work with the CIA. That's jokes. Two of the mobsters were on the top 10 FBI wanted list. It sort of shows you that they probably could get half of these people if they wanted to. They just don't.
The American government, of course, decided to give them a little bit of a pass for the time being so that both of the groups could focus on more pressing matters. The Castro regime had taken ownership of American properties in Cuba, and in response, the Eisenhower administration severed diplomatic relations with Cuba and allocated $13.1 million to the CIA in March of 1960.
Was that 13.1 million or billion?
Once the Eisenhower administration severed diplomatic relations with Cuba and allocated $13.1 million.
$13.1 million just to kill Fidel.
To the CIA in March of
That's
1960
outrageous.
for use in their campaign against Castro. The CIA at this point was sort of in its toddler stage and was just learning the ropes of being a black ops intelligence agency. And when you are a beginner, you tend to make a few mistakes.
So these are some of the first operations the CIA done. That's so interesting.
Now knows that hiding behind the curtain and being an invisible guiding hand is usually the best way to start any operation. But back then, they hadn't really learned that yet. So, right off the bat, they jumped immediately into the direct and out in the open approach. With the aid of Cuban counter-revolutionaries, the CIA proceeded to organize a full-on invasion of Cuba. Cuban exiles travelled to the US and formed the counter-revolutionary military unit Brigade 2506.
I think we heard about that brigade within the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? That's so jokes that they trained them up to send them back to be new rebels, basically.
The armed wing of the Democratic Revolutionary Front, and its purpose was to overthrow Castro's government. The CIA funded the brigade, which also included some US military personnel, and the CIA trained the unit in secret in Guatemala. Now, why would Cuban people want to rise up against Fidel Castro? After all, I thought that communist dictatorships were supposed to be amazing places to live.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Keep thinking that.
Well, it turns out that life in Cuba had become absolutely horrendous. In Cuba, 1961 was supposed to be the year of education. However, it quickly became known as the year of the firing squad. Cuba's agrarian reform chief, a man named Antonio Nunez Jimenez, made a speech to a crowd of gun-toting militiamen.
Right.
He said, "We will erect the most formidable execution wall in the history of humanity."
What?
Apparently, these executions were televised, and people would go and watch them live, with people even selling candy and drinks in the crowd.
Crazy different time. Crazy different time. Imagine just being so bored that you call up your pal, like, Jack, yeah, there's a televised shooting and assassination and like death squad. Do you want to go grab a couple of drinks and we'll go watch it? Yeah, cuz it'll be 20 minutes and just making your way down there. Like, that's crazy to me. That's stupid.
Like they were at the fucking movie theatre.
Yeah.
So yeah, it turns out that communism's fucking horrible. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Who fucking thought about it? Who knew communism was going to be shit?
And a lot of Cuban patriots wanted to rise up against this.
Revolutions are very messy indeed, DZ. And Mussolini hated the mafia. Yeah, I bet he hated the mafia.
So on the 17th of April 1961, over 1,400 paramilitaries divided into 5 infantry battalions and 1 paratrooper battalion, all trained and funded by the CIA with weapons supplied by the Mafia, all assembled and launched from Guatemala and Nicaragua by boat towards Cuba. 2 days before the invasion, 8 CIA-supplied B-26 bombers had attacked Cuban airfields and then returned to the US.
Okay.
On the night of the 17th of April, the main invasion force landed on the beach at Playa Giron, and
I remember in the Cuban Missile Crisis, this went terribly, didn't it?
known as the Bay of Pigs, where the invasion force quickly overwhelmed the local revolutionary militia. Initially, Jose Ramon Fernandez led the Cuban army counter-offensive, but later, when things were looking to be in their favour, Castro took personal control. As the invaders lost the strategic initiative, the international community found out about the invasion, and US President John F. Kennedy decided to withhold further air support since invading another country with a proxy army looks pretty fucking bad.
Wait. Oh, that's so funny. John F. Kennedy didn't find out until it was already undergoing. There were troops on the ground. There'd been bombings already happening. And then he finds out. He's like, yeah, boys. No. The CIA is there to do these types of things, just don't be so blatant. Like you're invading a country. We got to stop this. This is a no-go. This is stopping.
The entire plan, which was devised during Eisenhower's presidency, had required involvement of both air and naval forces, and the air support was crucial to the plan's success.
Yep.
So, with the air support withdrawn, the entire invasion plan fell apart.
I see.
Forces surrendered 3 days later, on the 20th of April, and most of the invading counter-revolutionary troops were publicly interrogated and put into Cuban prisons. As for what happened to them after that, well, the new execution wall was put to good use.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Actually deep what happened there. So the US, majority of these Cubans escaped Cuba, got into their freedom in the US, were then trained up, promised that they were going to be able to go back and get support, were sent there by the US, were doing well, and then when it all started going bad, they were left there to deal with the devices on their own and deal with the repercussions on their own. That's actually really bad now I think about it, because those poor people were going back on the understanding that they were going to have support and they were going to be able to get Cuba back, and then the US just left them to out in the cold, hung and dry. That's unfortunate. That's so peak.
The invasion was a complete failure, and the defeat of the American capitalist imperialists at the hand of Castro had solidified his role as a national hero in Cuba and widened the political division between the two formerly allied countries. It also pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union, setting the stage for the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The failure of the Bay of Pigs had embarrassed the American government, which made them hate Castro even more.
How are you going to hate someone even more when you fucked up, when it's your fucking fault? Idiots.
The American government had to get rid of him by any means necessary. So now we get into the many times that the CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro. And when I say many, it was somewhere around 638 attempts.
638 attempts. Holy shit. I thought I was expecting maybe 100. Maybe 638 attempts, and they botched 637 of them at the very least. How are you gonna fuck up that many times?
Yes, you heard that right.
I guess they needed some kind of experience, and they needed to test a lot of their theories. So I'd imagine a lot of the things they tried they never used again. So all the losses were learning experiences, right? Yeah, absolutely crazy numbers.
638 spanning the course of 40 years. And some of the plans that the CIA came up with are either extremely sinister or they sound like they came straight out of a cartoon.
No way.
Now, of course, we don't have time to go into all 638 attempts, but
let's hear the best ones.
We can talk about some of the more major ones and, of course, the funny ones. Initially, the attempts weren't on Castro's life, but on his character. America's intelligence services tried methods to undermine the leader's public image as a charismatic speaker and powerful leader. So, in the 1960s, the CIA planned to sabotage Castro's speeches by spraying his broadcasting studio with LSD in the hopes that he would start hallucinating and freak out while he was broadcasting live.
I mean, CIA, come spray up my house with LSD. I'll take a free trip and free drugs any day of the week. Like, this ain't a punishment. What, I got to do an interview and I start tripping out? I'm going to look better than anything else. I'll probably look more intelligent being fucking high and hallucinating than I do usually. Come on, that's jokes. Do they really think that was going to work?
Though this idea was dropped because not only is it a fucking stupid idea, but it would have been very hard to contain the chemical. And not just Castro, but everyone in the immediate area would have been affected.
Could you imagine? The crew gets up there, they start setting up their cameras. 10 minutes in, the manager just looks at the director and just goes, oh no. Oh no. And it all just kicks in. They all start tripping bollocks. That's fucking jokes. Oh my god. That would have been one hell of an interview. They were all just tripping off their nuts.
They would have all realised that something funny was going on. So the CIA had to continue to look for other options. So we can get into the method of assassination that most of you have no doubt heard of.
I have not.
Castro's cigars. Fidel loved his cigars, which you will see him smoking in pretty much every single picture of him. Cuban cigars are highly regarded all over the world, so there was no doubt a sense of pride for Fidel in smoking them. And
that makes sense. They're the best cigars in the world. You are Cuban, so you want to wear that with pride. Sort of a cultural thing.
The early plot was to spike the dictator's cigars. At this point, the plan was only to spike them with something non-lethal, like adding a chemical that would cause hallucinations, most likely LSD. Again, hoping...
Mate, CIA, if you're giving free drugs, give them to me.
...that he would smoke one before delivering one of his marathon speeches so that he would come across to his people as deranged and unhinged. Look, I'm really not sure why, but for some reason, during the 60s, the CIA was absolutely obsessed with LSD. The CIA...
They thought LSD was a miracle drug, didn't they?
Also had a plan to assassinate his beard. And in Cuba, like many other places, a beard was a cultural sign of
masculinity.
So
they were basically going to, in his sleep or somehow, shave his beard off and make him a baby face. To what? Basically, just demine him in any way. How's that going to work? That's absolutely jokes. Fun fact, he ruled until 2016 when he died at the age of 90. Very crazy.
And Fidel's beard was also iconic to his image. So earlier in his life, it was basically just a neck beard. But despite that, the CIA wanted Fidel's hair to fall out, giving him the appearance of a young boy, which is not a very good look for a powerful dictator. They tried to achieve this by dusting Castro's shoes with thallium salts, which would have made his prized facial hair fall out.
So it was so what they were hoping that he was going to like tie up and do his shoes and then like touch his face and the hair was going to come out. The CIA are fucking dumb.
Like many other attempts on Castro, this one failed because Castro cancelled the overseas trip that he was going to make to the location where the CIA had set up the operation. Castro always seemed to be multiple steps ahead of the game. The US government was desperate to be rid of Castro by this point, and they decided that instead of attempts to kill his image, they would instead just kill him.
They got sick and tired of it and they were like, no, enough's enough. You got to go, fam. Fam, you got to go.
Attempt to deal with Castro involved hiring the Mafia to poison his food. According to CIA documents named the Family Jewels papers that were declassified in 2007,
okay.
The US government had involved infamous American mobsters Johnny Roselli Salvatore Giancana, and Santo Trafficante to make Castro sleep with the fishes. In September of 1960, Salvatore Giancana, who was a successor of Al Capone in the Chicago outfit, and Miami syndicate leader Santo Trafficante were indirectly contacted by the CIA about the possibility of Castro's assassination.
What was the reward? What was the reward for those mafia bosses if they got the job done? Because I bet you it was big, and I bet you they nearly put everything they had into that.
Johnny Roselli, a member of the Las Vegas syndicate, was used by the CIA to gain access to these other mafia bosses. The go-between from the CIA was a man named Robert Mayhew, who introduced himself as a representative of several international businesses in Cuba that were expropriated by Castro.
Okay.
Mafia, as we already know, had plenty of reasons to accept. On September the 14th, Mayhew met with Roselli in a New York City hotel and offered him $150,000, which is close to $1.4 million in today's money, to assassinate Fidel Castro.
So it was only 1.4 million. Still, like I would have thought it would have been like exemptions, maybe something along them lines, but still 1.4 million. There's not a lot of things that I wouldn't do for 1.4 million, I think.
Present at the meeting was James O'Connell, who identified himself as Mayhew's associate, but he was actually the chief of the CIA's Operational Support Division. The declassified documents didn't reveal it.
So the CIA is literally next to these mafia bosses and just like, yeah, we're not going to arrest you, kill Fidel for us.
Roselli, Giancana or Trafficante had accepted a down payment for the job. But
that was only a down payment.
To the CIA files, it was Giancana who suggested using poison pills as a means to spike Castro's food and drink. The pills were then manufactured by the CIA's Technical Services Division, and they were given to Giancana's nominee, a man named Juan Orta. Giancana recommended Orta to be an official in the Cuban government, which would give him easy access to Fidel Castro.
They were going in deep for this assassination. How did this one not work?
Unsuccessful attempts to introduce the poison into Castro's food, Orta quickly got cold feet and demanded to be released from the mission, which was then handed over to another unnamed participant. The second attempt was mounted through Giancana and Trafficante using a man named Dr. Anthony Verona, the leader of the Cuban exile junta, who had, according to Trafficante, become disaffected with the apparent ineffectual progress of the junta. Verona requested $10,000 in expenses and $1,000 worth of communications equipment. However, it is unknown how far the second attempt went.
Why? What happened?
The attempt was cancelled for unknown reasons.
Interesting.
Had some kind of supernatural luck, because this would be one of the many times that the assassination attempts against him would fail. People either got cold feet, the CIA would abandon their convoluted, ridiculous plans,
because they knew it weren't going to work, because they're fucking useless. The CIA is absolutely useless. Normal assassinations go for as much as 50,000 to 100,000, so 1 million is not that bad at all. It is in really poor areas can only be a few thousand. I agree, yeah. In poor areas it would be a lot less, for sure.
Was just 10 steps ahead. Another plot by the CIA was to spike Castro's cigars with something much more lethal. Something that was called botulinum toxin, which was strong enough that it would kill anyone simply putting one of the cigars anywhere near their lips.
No way. You don't even have to inhale anything. Literally just have it onto your lips and you will die. That is scary. That is worrying.
Delivered to an unidentified person, but it is unclear what happened to them after that. Did the assassin get cold feet? Was the plot uncovered? We just simply don't know. But we know that the cigars never reached Fidel Castro. Because
he's alive.
he was still alive. And one of the most well-known attempts made on Castro's life was when the CIA had apparently replaced one of his cigars with an explosive replica, hoping that Castro would light it up and it would explode in his face.
They just wanted this guy dead. They didn't care how brutal it was. They didn't care if it was a smart plan or not. They needed to try everything. Like I said a bit earlier, the CIA had only just been opened up, so they really needed to try every single book, trick in the book to see what worked and what didn't work.
Although many of you have probably heard of this one, and a lot of you probably believe it, the exploding cigar was most likely just a myth.
Okay.
Other cigar-related attempts, though it really isn't too far-fetched when you think about all the other crazy shit that the CIA tried to pull. So maybe the exploding cigar was an idea that was considered, but it looks like it was never actually attempted. However, it still turned into a bit of an urban legend. Castro seemed to be aware that the CIA was trying to pull some shit with his cigars. So Castro eventually created his own brand of cigars called Cohiba, which he established in 1966 as a limited production private brand which supplied exclusively to Fidel Castro and other high-level officials in the Communist Party of Cuba.
I bet you that brand was worth money.
So, because the cigar manufacturing process and the cigars themselves were now under heavy lockdown, tampering with Castro's cigars became very difficult and frankly not
impossible
worth time or money to the CIA. So they had to look for other options. And that is when they discovered Castro's love of the sea. The CIA had devised yet another elaborate plan as intelligence officials found out that Castro loved scuba diving.
Oh, okay.
Scuba diving, of course, is very dangerous.
That's an interesting hobby to have, especially as a dictator. I don't know why that's confused me so much. I was not expecting him to enjoy scuba diving so much.
Even if you know what you're doing. And with scuba diving, accidents happen all the time. So this would be a perfect opportunity to kill Castro, but also...
How though? How are you going to get to this man if he's scuba diving?
Will not arouse too much suspicion. So what genius plan did the CIA come up with? Were they going to mess with the oxygen levels in the supply tank? Were they going to attract sharks to the area and attack them? Maybe they were going to have some Navy SEALs lying in wait under the ocean just to physically drown him while he was underwater. No one could see. No, those plans would have actually made sense. No, what the CIA wanted to do instead was make a big seashell and paint it a bunch of pretty colours, hoping that Castro would notice it while he was diving and go, "Ooh, I've never seen a shell like that before," where he would then swim down to it and try to pick it up, where that would then detonate. That would then detonate the explosives that would have been hidden under it. A booby-trapped seashell.
A booby-trapped fucking seashell. What the fuck? Do you reckon they just have like 10 jacks? Do you reckon the CIA just have 10 jacks sitting around a table sometimes, just pinging off stupid autistic ideas to each other, and then just one of them going, that one, that one's good. We'll go for that one. We will booby trap a multicolored rainbow shellfish. He will pick it up. Boom, he's dead. Plan solved. No more. Let's go. Let's put it into action. Like, there's no logistical thoughts about it at all.
Fucking booby trapped seashell. The CIA actually wanted to go ahead with this, but the idea was shot down by the higher-ups for being impractical.
Yeah, of course it was fucking impractical. They literally just had a bunch of interns sitting at a table just going, come up with something creative, and then the higher-ups have just gone, oh my god, are you all fucking stupid? Are you all just absolute fucking idiots? Absolutely crazy, so funny. Even dictators are human. Evil humans, but they're still human. I also agree, DZ.
And then what the CIA should have done is immediately fire the arsehole that came up with that idea.
Please tell me they fired the idiot that come up with the idea.
Done is immediately fire the arsehole that came up with that idea. The CIA, however, were still going to try to kill Castro at sea, but this time with a much more sensible plan, which was to poison his scuba suit and breathing apparatus with a fungus that would cause a debilitating respiratory illness, which most likely would kill him.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
It would still put him out of commission for a very long time. The poisoned suit and breathing gear was meant to be given to Castro by an American lawyer named James Donovan, who had been involved in hostage negotiations with Castro, and the two had developed a relationship.
Okay, very interesting.
There are two versions of what happened next. One version says that Donovan wimped out at the last second and gave Castro a different suit to the infected one. And the other version, told by Richard Helms, who later became CIA director, said that the suit never even left the CIA laboratory because the whole plan was, in his words, cockeyed. The CIA had to...
Literally, like, there was no actual logistic plan for it. It was all going to be fucked up.
Scaled down their plans from these Looney Tunes schemes and decided to try to kill Castro using a hypodermic needle concealed inside a ballpoint pen. Something a lot more fitting to a secret agent intelligence agency instead of LARPing as Wile E. Coyote.
The needle on the ball tip pen is literally how you would expect the CIA to actually operate. So it took them some time to learn what they needed to do. It's absolutely crazy, some of these first assassination attempts they tried.
It would be so fine that Castro wouldn't even notice the insertion. A later report said that the needle was to be rigged with poison and injected into Castro by a high-ranking Cuban official who was in secret talks with the CIA.
Yep.
However, the Cuban official thought that the device was shit. And he complained to the CIA, saying that surely they could come up with something a little bit more sophisticated. This assassination attempt also suffered very bad timing because the official was given
How so?
On November the 22nd, 1963, which was the date of John F. Kennedy's assassination. So the CIA were very busy that day. What were they busy with? Well, who knows? Maybe that'll get declassified one day.
Maybe it will.
In March of 1961, CIA officer Richard Bissell had managed to smuggle a vial of poison to a restaurant employee in the Havana Hilton, with the idea being that he would pour it into Castro's milkshake the next time the dictator stopped by.
Okay.
He did regularly for milkshakes, since Castro had this really weird major obsession with milk and other dairy products. Like like Castro's obsession with milk and dairy could get its own video.
I'm now interested. How is he so fixated on milk?
Just that in its own. Like, Castro even wanted to create a new breed of dog-sized mini cow so that every household in Cuba could have milk whenever they wanted it. But let's...
These dictators always have a screw loose.
Look, let's not get sidetracked. Castro, however...
I kind of want to get sidetracked. I want you to make a video about why Fidel has such an obsession with fucking milk. I need to know. You can't just give me a little tease.
Didn't show at the hotel for a few months, but it seemed that he caught wind of the plot as the Cuban security police showed up and found the poison veal frozen to the cooling coils of the restaurant freezer. In keeping with being a dictator, Castro had eyes and ears everywhere.
He was killed, right?
That's one of the reasons he was able to stay one step ahead of the US government every time. So, the CIA had to go back to the drawing board and decided to go for a different approach. They were going to find people that Castro was emotionally close to in his past. The CIA recruited one of Castro's former lovers, a woman named Marita Lorenz. She had been given poison pills to put in Castro's drink while they were having a dinner date.
Yeah.
But she only managed to get as far as smuggling the pills into Castro's bedroom inside a jar of face cream, which was not a very smart idea because the pills had dissolved into the cream. And she couldn't exactly force-feed Castro the face cream, so she made the smart move and decided to abandon the assassination attempt.
In that situation, I would have abandoned it as well.
According to Lorenz, Castro somehow knew about her plan, so he confronted her about it. And when he did, he offered her his gun and said, "Here you go, kill me then." And obviously, she did not take the gun and shoot him because she was terrified. Castro then
Of course she was terrified. I mean, if you shoot him there and then, it's obvious that it's going to be you. And then, like, she's in the country and, like, she's got to deal with all the other men that were loyal to him. There's no way you can kill him there and then without suffering some kind of horrible, horrific repercussions.
Apparently said, "You can't kill me, nobody can kill me." And he smiled while chewing on his cigar. She said that she felt completely deflated because Castro was so confident and knew that she wouldn't kill him. And then they had sex.
Yeah.
What? Like, most couples usually have angry sex after one almost kills the other. Of course, many of the other attempts on Castro's life are still under redaction and have not yet been released to the public. The last known attempt was in the year 2000 when a plan was hatched to put 90 tons of explosives under a podium where he was due to speak in Panama. 90 tons of
90 tons
for just one man.
90 tons. 90 tons. That's ridiculous. That's overkill. That's outrageous.
Though, due to Castro's many eyes and ears, the plot was foiled by his security team, which managed to pull him out of the area quickly before anything could happen. But there was one thing that did manage to get close to Castro and deal some damage. And it wasn't the CIA, it wasn't rebels, it wasn't militants, and it wasn't a jilted lover. It was a step. And after all the
time... What, he just tripped over?
It was a step. And after all the time, effort, and money put into killing Fidel Castro, on the night of the 25th of November 2016, at the age of 90, Fidel Castro passed away. The exact cause of death was not disclosed though, and some believe it may have been an assassination attempt that was finally successful.
At the age of 90, it's too far gone. There's no way they continued. Once he hit a certain age, they probably went, he's not got long left, we just need to leave him now.
And the Cuban government just said natural causes so that no one would get demoralized and the Cuban government wouldn't look weak for letting its leader be assassinated. But the most likely explanation is when a man is 90 years old and is still drinking 10 milkshakes and smoking 20 cigars a day, I think it's safe to say that the death might be self-inflicted. Fidel's brother, President Raul Castro, confirmed the news of Fidel's death in a brief speech. His death came 9 months after his older brother, Ramon, died at the age of 91 in February. Fidel Castro was cremated on the 26th of November 2016, and his funeral procession travelled 560 miles along the island's central highway from Havana to Santiago de Cuba. And after 9 days of public mourning, his ashes were entombed in the Santa Ifigenia Cemetery in Santiago de Cuba. Now, Fidel Castro was a fucking horrible tyrant. He was an awful person. But you can imagine how stressful it must be when every single day you have to look around every corner, check every bite of food, every sip of drink, and also not being able to trust those closest to you in case they had turned CIA informant. That can have...
That pressure would just put such a strain on your mental, just on your mental in general. Could you imagine having to be that paranoid for your whole entire life?
A severe mental effect on a person, which Castro, in my opinion, absolutely deserved. But when the person suffering from that is a dictator with a lot of power, that kind of thing can lead to very bad things for the country's people. So personally, I think what the CIA did made life a lot harder for the Cuban people, because shit flows downhill. But what is...
Do you know what? Count Dankula with a very good point there. A very good point that I didn't take into consideration. And I'm glad he sort of pointed it out there. Were all those failed assassination attempts and all the meddling from the CIA actually cause more issues for the Cuban people? Because like he said, shit rolls downhill. So the more issues you're causing and providing Fidel means the more harsh he's going to act upon the people below him, because the more scared he is. Very good point Count Dankula has put up there, and definitely something we should all think about.
It's just truly funny. It's the CIA who, let's be honest, are a terrorist organisation. But
that was based. That was so based and true. The CIA is basically a terrorist organisation. True.
The CIA spent tens, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars on over 600 attempts to kill a man through a bunch of harebrained, wacky cartoon schemes, only to have every single one of them fail, and for their target to instead die naturally at the ripe old age of 90. Now that's comedy.
Mate, as Fidel, I bet he was sitting all... Because he must have known that they were after him. I bet he was so smug it never happened.
Hey, it's just us now. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. Right now, I know that the videos for this month, I've only uploaded 3 videos this month, and they've all been kind of major. You know.
Oh, is this actually a part of the video?
The reason for that is I'm taking time off this month for the holidays so that I can be with my family. That was an absolute nightmare to set up. However, it will just be mad lads as well.
It was a great reaction. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think he's just sort of talking about his bit personal life there. But what a great video by Count Dankula. Always hits his target with his comedy. It's a bit of me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Right, so before we jump on to...